Well, the question now is how far is Kim Jong Un prepared to go to make a deal? Here's Ben Rhodes, former Deputy National Security Advisor to President Obama.
This is really complicated. You know, what is a good deal? I haven't even heard President Trump articulate what is he trying to achieve here. And if you go to a meeting and you don't know what you're trying to get out of that meeting, you're much less likely to achieve something. My concern is that North Korea makes a kind of empty promise. Sure, we will give up our nuclear weapons. We will denuclearize. But there's nothing underneath that. They've done that before twice. And the question is going to be whether Donald Trump just wants to celebrate a victory, but there's actually really nothing underneath it.
Let's bring in Adam Mount, Senior Fellow with the Federation of American Scientists. We also have Sung-Yoon Lee, Professor of Korean Studies at the Fletcher School, Tufts University. And let's start with you on this, Sung-Yoon. You've seen the development so far. You've seen how Kim Jong Un has arrived. And as we look at this information coming into us, this is a little bit new for us, actually, to put together the word leader of North Korea doing X and doing Y and seeing Z. What's your reflection on what we've seen so far?
It is new, it is unprecedented, and that's exactly why this is quite captivating. North Korea is very adept at playing this game. They go on a period of relentless, crazy-sounding provocations, and then they dramatically change the tune from molto agitato to placido, flashing smiles, and thereby they come across as reasonable as the peace-seeking party, and they are able to get the U.S. to give North Korea a lot of aid, $1.3 billion between 1995 and 2008. For what? All for repeated lies of denuclearization. It's a very simple two-act play, provocation, and then post-provocation peace ploy, and we're in that phase, the second phase.
Adam, the two-act approach is what Sung-Yoon is saying here. How would you describe the two-act approach?
Well, there is certainly a cycle of provocation with North Koreans where they will dial up the tension and then proceed to walk it back and try to reap diplomatic benefits. We are now in that second stage. And so, you know, you've heard the president say that that any agreement will be spur of the moment, that he will improvise when he gets into Singapore. That's not an attitude that will serve him well. You know, the North Koreans all through the year have orchestrated the run-up to this summit. They've offered the concessions that they wanted to offer, and they've not been forced to make the kinds of commitments and guarantees that Donald Trump was hoping for. So in some ways, they've really orchestrated a situation where Donald Trump will be coming into Singapore blind.
Coming in blind, but used to, if you will, moving quickly, right, based on an ambiguous situation, some might say, and what the president is also claiming here. Sung-Yoon, and you heard what the president said on the way into this discussion, this historic meeting with Kim Jong Un. He said, you know, it'll take me about a minute or so to really get a sense of whether something can happen with this. And then there was the very backdrop of the G7, and the president also saying we are no longer going to put the United States signature to the communique. Putting those two together, how do you believe the Kim Jong Un camp is taking that into their strategy? How are they distilling those latest developments on the Trump administration side?
I hope President Trump brings that. Sorry, was that?
Sung-Yoon, go ahead.
I hope President Trump brings that kind of firm resolve to be tough to the Singapore meeting. There's a lot of posturing going on. The president has said he'll just walk out if the talks don't proceed to his liking. Kim Jong Un said he's leaving, he's taking off on June 12th. He has a 2 p.m. flight to catch, basically giving President Trump all of 3 hours. So this is posturing, but I think that kind of spontaneity or spur of the moment, touch and feel in sizing up Kim Jong Un, that is, how shall I say, concerning, because North Korea is very, very good at playing this game, and Kim Jong Un has really, literally, been trained. He's been training, preparing all his life for this moment. President Trump, not so much.
As we look at this, Adam, and because Sung-Yoon brought this up, the very detail that we're just learning, that Kim Jong Un is saying, it's going to be a handful of hours, then I have to catch a flight, and how President Trump might react to that. We saw how he reacted to Justin Trudeau and his statements. Might we see real time, that this could fritter away in front of us, this historic summit?
Well, that would be North Korea's objective. They have an interest in holding a cosmetic summit, not being forced to make specific commitments, to agree to verified limits on denuclearization. You know, North Korea will want to sort of pop in and out, to shake hands and grin for the cameras, and not be forced to make these kinds of commitments. So Donald Trump has really, in some ways, played into their hands in this regard. He's made it very, very difficult on himself. There are reports that he will hold a one-on-one meeting with Kim Jong Un. You know, the more expert staff that Donald Trump has in that room with him, the higher his leverage is, the greater his ability is to pin North Korea down on specifics, to eliminate ambiguities that North Korea would exploit, and to ensure that everything's coordinated amply with our allies. You know, if Kim Jong Un can truncate the timetable of this summit, that would serve his interests, certainly.
Yeah, you know what's different this time that the two of you know so well here, Sung-Yoon, is that this has, at least in recent times, since the early 1990s, been a multilateral effort. The so-called, so-famed Sixparty talks that really resulted in very little progress here. But they're still watching. Singapore being, again, as I've mentioned earlier, this very small dot, this, size of Chicago, sitting amongst some very important allies to the United States, sitting next to the largest Muslim country, Indonesia. We have South Korea, Japan, Taiwan, the Philippines, and very important to the United States, Sung-Yoon. And it's sort of like they are in the Grand Amphitheater, or they represent that Grand Amphitheater, and right at the bottom on stage is Singapore. They're all watching. What are they hoping for, Sung-Yoon?
Well, Singapore is the right location. It's a snazzy, ultra-modern, cosmopolitan city-state, quite well-versed in putting on big shows, big stage like this. I think the person to really look out for, is the sister, the royal censor, Kim Yo Jong. Her day job is as the head of the Department of Propaganda and Agitation to systematically censor the North Korean people so that the family regime can stay in power in perpetuity. She is a new weapon for the North Korean regime. As we've seen, she flashes smiles. She wears a softer, feminine image to the ultra-weird, ultra-unattractive image that is the North Korean state. So she is a sanctions-busting weapon for North Korea, and I think she'll play a major role over the next couple of days.
You know, it's interesting that you bring that up, Sung-Yoon, and now to you, Adam, on this question. The reporting being out of North Korea that Kim Jong Un's sister, his younger sister, as head of media, head of propaganda, has shifted the color tones, has shifted the very messages coming out. Instead of very aggressive but more dovish, if you will, messages reaching out to the North Korean people, indicating potentially a shift that they are, or she is, now communicating to North Koreans. What do you think that might mean?
That's right. We have seen some shifts in the North Korean regime over the last couple of weeks and months. There was a shakeup of the military leadership as well. It's important to recognize, with so much focus on the pageantry, with so much focus on the optics, that not only we, but also President Trump, remember that this is a brutal regime that exploits, imprisons, enslaves the North Korean people. It's not appropriate to rush to normalize relations without concessions on that regard. It's important that he doesn't get taken in by the optics and the pageantry of the situation, that he remembers that he's dealing with a brutal country and pushes them on human rights. One of the goals for this summit should be, one of the guiding rules should be, any agreement should be good for the North Korean people. Because if we can start to gradually assist with the transformation of North Korea over time, that's one of the ways where denuclearization gets put on a firmer footing, rather than just a one-off summit that everything depends upon and could fall apart at a moment's notice.
Sung-Yoon, the history of this armistice, of the war in Korea, it is long, it is well felt by Americans, it is well felt by Korean Americans. it is certainly well felt by South and North Koreans, too. For those who remember those decades ago, who served, and now are watching potentially the end to the war, the armistice is what we remember. We remember the DMZ. And for those who are part of the diaspora, those who are separated on the very peninsula. I'm laying out all these layers here, Sung-Yoon, because there is so much at stake for those who just want to be families again.
That's right. And the Korean War ended 65 years ago, we know, not with a formal peace treaty, but a temporary ceasefire agreement. However, there has been no war in or around the Korean peninsula since the end of the war in 1953. And South Korea has grown very rich. In the meantime, North Korea has gone the other way, has taken a great leap backward. And this dynamic has implications. South Korea and the United States simply just have too much on the line. They don't want to escalate tit for tat with North Korea. And North Korea knows that very well. There has never been any military response by either the U.S. or South Korea in the face of egregious, lethal attacks against Americans and South Koreans by North Korea over the past decade. So peace treaty sounds very nice, but it can be a ruse for North Korea to get the U.S. troops in the South to leave and to be able to have its way prevail over South Korea one day.
When we look at the region and the major player, as has been said, out of the G7, who will fill in the which country will fill in the gap as the United States starts to take a step back, if you will, in global leadership? The often named country is China. That was certainly brought up in the aftermath of the G7 meeting, and then the United States through the tweet of President Trump saying that they will not be part of what is the traditional communique or message where they all say we agree on these one or two or three different things. So as the United States, it appears to take a step back here, Adam, from that global leadership role, and we look at China stepping in with the Silk Road, right, as well as with a regional trade pact, sans the United States. Does China really win the most out of this particular meeting for various reasons that you might be able to tell us about?
Well, certainly as Donald Trump has turned his sights on allies, he has looked to adversaries for solace. As the United States has taken a step back from its global commitments, it has struck up new tensions over trade. American leadership, unfortunately, is in decline. Russia and China have made very, very rapid advancements. In Beijing, they are looking at this process as being greater than anything they could have imagined, anything they would have hoped for. So China is looking to this North Korea summit as part of this whole process. They're looking for a way to try to safeguard their interests in Northeast Asia. As Professor Lee mentioned, North Korea will be trying to push the United States out of Northeast Asia and the U.S.-South Korea alliance. Beijing has an interest in that as well. And so, the sight of not seeing President Moon in Singapore as part of these deliberations is troubling in that regard. The Trump administration has left our South Korea ally to some extent out of the loop. Coordination has not been as tight as it should have been. The Panmunjom process and the Singapore process have been split apart. That allows both North Korea, but also Beijing, additional leverage to play the allies off each other. That's certainly not in America's interest, and it's, as you say, part of this broader process of American retrenchment.
And from a very domestic perspective, as you so well provided, the international perspective here, Adam, there is that for a moment where the focus is not on China. Instead, today, it is on North Korea and Kim Jong Un. President Trump about to arrive on the left-hand side of your screen there at the Paya Lebar Singapore Air Force Base in what we believe to be a handful of minutes, as often is said, and it is a late evening, so we'll go to that when that does happen. But for a moment, my two friends, please do stand by, Sung-Yoon and Adam. We will be speaking to you later in the hour. President Trump, as I was mentioning, about to arrive there, and what he said, though, this weekend about Kim Jong Un before he got on the plane. Trump saying he'll know in the first minute if something good is going to happen. What to make of this strategy, plus what happened at the end of that G7 summit, all said.